I'm happy to be here today to be able to talk to you a little bit about Cloudbrink and the exciting things that we're working on, and especially how AWS is helping us to achieve that goal, basically with our technology. So what I'd like to start off with is just to kind of share a couple of examples of things that have happened in the industry, some breaches that have occurred, some vulnerabilities that have been present in the last few years, to really kind of show you how the industry has changed, how technologies have kind of grown and emerged out of post the pandemic, and kind of how remote access is viewed as a different entity now. Just to give you just a little bit of background, so I used to work in the MSP industry for 22 years, and then I switched over to the vendor side about 6 years ago. But I've been working with remote access and VPN technology since the mid 90s. And so it's been very exciting to kind of see how the technology has grown over the years, and really how we've moved into this, cloud hybrid model, and how we're able to provide wonderful access. So just to share a couple of examples here. So back in 2019, with a major financial institution breach, attackers were able to exploit a weak TLS configuration and misconfigured firewall, basically causing, the root issue being within proper certificate rotation with weak permissions and web application firewalls. And one of the major things that the industry has focused on is, if we can remember how, pre-pandemic, remote access was kind of viewed more as a luxury. And now post-pandemic, it is now viewed as critical infrastructure. And with that, threat actors have started to target these systems in place. And so here's one example of that. Another example is in 2020 through a software supply chain attack, where attackers leveraged poor certificate rotation practices on the updated system, where either an older or outdated certificate was compromised to allow access into the environment. And in 2022, an enterprise VPN vulnerability. The vulnerability allowed attackers to execute remote code, basically allowing the system to be compromised and for access to be granted within the environment. And then finally, like a session resumption flaw in 2022, the vulnerability allowed revoked client certificates to bypass security. These are major issues and major concerns that companies are dealing with today, and threat actors are specifically targeting. And so when we think about the traditional model, the traditional VPN model, which was an appliance sitting somewhere in a data center, and then we accessed that appliance with a client, and then we had access to our data in that data center, and then cloud technology started to emerge, and so we started to access data not only in our data centers but in those VPCs as well. But we had to have those expensive backend circuits to connect into those environments as well, or we had to have multiple devices in multiple locations in order to connect to all of our data and things like that. And so that older design is no longer kind of relevant and valid in the networks of today. And so that's where companies like us come in, where Cloudbrink comes in. And so there's three major pillars that we here at Cloudbrink, we focus and specialize in. And this is really just kind of what's emerged and what we've learned over the years, and talking to customers and spending time listening to their concerns. And really one of the biggest things that we try and focus on here at Cloudbrink is to helping companies address the specific concerns and needs that they have today. And so our three major pillars that we focus on are security, performance, and visibility into your user base. So one of the ways that one of the key features is how we handle the security side of the house. And so I'll elaborate a little bit on that now. So when we think about remote access today, most of the time we're familiar with an MFA solution with an identity provider providing that validation on the front end. So we integrate with any SAML2 provider to provide that MFA on the front end to validate the user. In addition to that, we have a fully built host checker utility that's built into the product to not only validate the user, but to validate the device, because the mindset in this zero trust world is we want to make sure that we trust our users, but we also want to make sure we trust the devices that they're connecting with. And so whether it's a BYOD device or a corporate issued device, we want to be able to check those devices to make sure that they're compliant, that they're patched, that they're up to date, that they're domain joined, or that a process is running in the background down, or there's a key in the registry that we're searching for. And so we're going to check those devices on the front end. And the mindset is in that zero trust solution is validate the user, validate the device, and make sure that we fully trust them before we even allow them access to the data that we're providing them to. In addition to that, we utilize a fully built-in firewall as a service option on the solution to not only check and validate at the IP level, but at the port and protocol level as well. And two major differentiators on how we're handling that to address those specific issues on those vulnerabilities that I showed in those first 4 slides is we're doing mutually authenticated TLS 1.3 at the transport layer. We're validating that device, that certificate from the device all the way to the distant end where that resource is sitting, taking advantage of the latest encryption standards of TLS 1.3. But then the other piece is the way that we handle key distribution. So when we think of how key distribution is handled with traditional solutions where we have a certificate that we get cut from our CA, that cert is usually valid for a year, apologize for that, for a year to 3 years on the high end. And like I said, in all devices connecting in utilize that certificate. What we have done is we basically have taken that a little one step further, and we manage and maintain our own PKI infrastructure. And what that means for us is that we assign a unique certificate for every single device that connects in, and we rotate that certificate every 8 hours. And so the way that what we view that as is we view that as our automated moving threat defense. Because if you think about a traditional solution where that's using one cert for all devices for a year or more, we're using a unique cert for every device, and we're changing it 3 times a day. And so that's a major piece on the way that we're handling key distribution and managing those digital certificates. So we are a 100% software-based solution, and we're 100% in the cloud, and AWS is a major partner for us. In fact, it is our largest partner that we utilize with, because all of our edge technology exists in the cloud, and the vast majority of our edges reside in the AWS space. And so to kind of further elaborate on that a little bit more, the mindset behind a cloud infrastructure model with a solution like this is that because our edges that we're connecting into reside in cloud space, and because cloud technology is advancing and growing so fast, is we're able to increase our reach. So we actually can get edges anywhere from 5 to 20 milliseconds away for about 80% of the population of the world. One of the greatest examples I can share about that was a customer that I was speaking with a couple of months ago that was down in South America, and they were particularly concerned about access for users in Bogota, Colombia. And so I, double checked our map to see where we had edges available, and we didn't have anything in Colombia at the time. And so I popped on AWS's website, and I went to their coming soon section with their availability zones and local zones. And sure enough, in their coming soon section was Bogota, Colombia. And so the flexibility that granted us is I was able to tell that customer, the moment that local zone becomes available, we can deploy an edge there, and you'll now have a local edge in that country. And so as the technology grows, so does our reach. And so as of at the start of 2024, we've broken over 1,000 edges deployed worldwide to be able to grant access to all of our user base. When we think about, so the other piece is kind of like that we like to dive into is the performance side of the house, which is equally as important. So when we think of the hybrid worker, whether they're working from the home office or on the road, in the hotel or in the coffee shop or whatever, they're accessing their their data and their networks on public ISP connections, public connections. And so generally what happens is when we're sitting on those public ISP connections, on average, we're sitting around 1 to 2% of data loss on those consumer grade connections. And most of our loss actually occurs in the last mile. And so when we're experiencing loss, whether it's in the form of latency, jitter, wireless interference, just packet loss as an overall whole, we get congestion due to oversubscribers, we see higher delays, we have a weak signal, and generally what that lends to is a poor experience for the user. And because we're now in this hybrid world and we're working in these remote scenarios, we want that in-office like experience. We want our applications to perform the way that they should. We want that quick zippy connection like we were used to when we were in the office. And so that's another one of the major pieces that we try to address here at Cloudbrink. And so one of the ways that we do that is not only, like I said before, where we're bringing the edges physically closer to where those users are sitting, that 5 to 20 milliseconds away, we're also creating an overlay network that gets applied to the connection in that last mile. And that overlay network is doing things like packet piggybacking, packet deduplication, forward error correction. We're doing some preactive packet recovery. We're doing some caching at the local edge. Close to 70 different checks and optimizations in that overlay are being performed. And that overlay, its primary function is to reduce loss. And so as we're able to reduce loss down to zero or as close to zero as possible, we just start to see this massive uptick in performance. So now all of a sudden, those file downloads are coming down much quicker, or that VDI environment that we're accessing, we're no longer seeing that delay with the mouse to the screen or the keyboard to the screen. Or sitting on something like this, like a UCaaS call, where we're, possibly a little bit of losses playing a role where we're seeing a degradation in our video or our audio quality. My greatest use case is I live in a fairly newer residential area and we don't have fiber networks in our neighborhood yet. I actually have a wireless antenna on my roof. And so I'm susceptible to loss and interference and all those things because of that wireless connection. And once I started using Cloudbrink, I've been able to reduce that loss, and I'm no longer experiencing the problem of like having to turn the video off so that people can actually hear me or whatever, so that the audio will come through. And so the performance side of the house is designed to increase or to reduce that loss and increase that overall experience. One of the other areas that AWS is really helping us with is because of those edges that we have sitting in cloud space. The moment I connect into that edge, I'm now on that cloud provider's network. So now I'm traversing their backbone to get across the country or to get across the pond over to Asia or Europe or anything like that. And generally, those routes are more optimal than the public routes that we see from our public ISPs. And so AWS is helping us a lot in that area, not only hosting our edges, but also allowing us to traverse that backbone network to give us some mid-mile optimization as well. And generally, when we apply all that to a solution, we start to see things like faster access to our applications and smoother audio and video, reliable access to VDI environments. One of my greatest examples that I can share about the performance side of the house, a great case study that we have, is one of our Fortune 100 customers came to us after the pandemic with a very specific need, and they had multiple developers. They had developers that were now no longer in the office, that were working remote, and they were dealing with these massive terabyte size files, like files in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 terabytes that they were having to download from their corporate offices, upload them to their dev kits, work on them, and then when done, they had to upload the files back. And on their existing VPN solutions, those files were taking anywhere from 12, 13, upwards of 20 hours to download those massive files over the existing solutions. As we're all well aware, because I'm pretty sure we've all worked on some legacy VPN solutions in the past, and we're all familiar with that concept of connecting in and all of a sudden seeing our connection cut in half or even cut down even more. At Cloudbrink, we will never be the performance degradator in the solution. We're always going to try and give you as close to your line rate as possible. And so what they did is this Fortune 100 company is they conducted an internal test against all of the other products that they had in their studios. And they took the time to plot the results in seconds for all of the solutions. And Cloudbrink beat every solution in the environment. And what they were seeing is they were seeing upwards of a 30x reduction in code check-in times, and files that were taking 15 to 20 hours, they were now getting in 30 minutes to an hour downloaded, and they were able to basically be productive in that day. And so that's one of my favorite examples that I can share with on how the performance side of the solution has really benefited companies like that. And then also if we think about how we're accessing data as well, so not only do we have data that sits in our data centers, but we also have data that sits in our VPCs, and we also have our applications that sit in the cloud. And the mindset is that we don't care where the data sits. We don't care if it's a public application or a private application. We will provide access to those resources all through one connection. We kind of break that connection down into two different categories. We refer to them as either application services or enterprise services. An application service is essentially what we define as anything that's public. So anything sitting in a public cloud or anything that's public facing. And then we have our enterprise services, which are anything that is private, anything sitting in a data center behind a firewall, whether it's a VPC or a company-owned data center. For those solutions, we have a connector that gets deployed on a hypervisor. We pretty much support all the hypervisors in the market, and then that that connector just gets onboarded into the solution within your edge network, and then you're now able to access all of your data regardless of where it sits through that one connection, taking advantage of that overlay for the performance optimizations as well as the security parameters as well, basically securing that connection, providing the MFA and the posture assessment on the front end, and also taking advantage of those rotating certificates in that connection over MTLS 1.3. So overall, what we're seeing, is we're seeing that enhanced user experience, upwards of a 30x reduction in code check-in times and speed performance. We are a software-defined solution, built on a cloud tech, architecture. And the overall mindset is to provide access as quickly as possible, as well as doing it as secure as possible. And that's Cloudbrink, and that's what we do. And the major piece, like I said, is that what we're most interested in is speaking with customers and learning what are their pain points and figuring out how we can help them to achieve better results. Because ideally, we just want that better in-office-like experience when we're working remote. So thank you very much for hanging on. Happy holidays to all of you. And again, thank you for your time.